I traveled with a portable humidifier for the plane. And as pretentious as that sounds, it was a lifesaver.
I hate you.
Like,
why? You're imposing that on the people around you.
No.
So everyone would like being humidified.
No, it's a really, really small thing. And I was often
beads of sweat.
Man, there's no. I'm backpedaling because there's no way this conversation is going to go well for me. I would be I wouldn't be around other people due to the nature of my seating arrangement.
Right, because you're in first class with your fucking humidifier, Troy Baker. Yeah.
But here's the reason why. I typically would hit the ground running.
I loved the very gentle way. I wouldn't be around other people. Like
I wouldn't. If I could help it,
That's referred to as...
I will not fly among the peasants.
Yeah.
Is it
just the peasants.
The seat side
just the
proletariat,
okay? Let's put them in
just
the
a row.
Troy sees there's two seating areas of the plane. There's the Troy section and then
such
steerage.
relatable shit.
Yeah.
I've never flown first class, so I'll bring that.
Don't.
Yeah, actually, I'm with Troy because when you do it, you start to resent not doing it,
Pam,
and you reach a point of no return, and it's good to just.
You know what? I did one time, but it was Seattle to San Francisco, which is like an hour flight that I got upgraded for, and I was like, great, useful, thank you, appreciate it.
I remember we were coming back from Hawaii, and I didn't get my upgrade, and I remember Pam looking at me. She goes, "I feel like I'm in trouble." I was like, I have spoiled you. Look, I'm only able to do that because of the auspices of other people that have been incredibly kind and very generous. And one of the reasons why is because typically it was you hit the ground, especially at Heathrow or whatever, and I am straight to work. So it became necessary for me to get some good sleep. One of the things that I found is that at altitude in that cabin, I would get really, really dried out. So having this little personal humidifier, and literally, it's like it looks like a plastic donut, and you screwed a water bottle into it, and then you just like dumped it over, flipped like this, and it would just last for 6 hours.
It's like a little every like
it was like a constant
steam thing. So first, as a journalist, I've also done a lot of fly places, hit the ground running. Definitely no first class, $40,000 a year salary in San Francisco.
How long were those flights?
I mean, one time I had to go to Gamescom. It took me 32 hours, and I had to work 2 hours after landing.
You know there's a direct flight
from Australia?
Oh, from Australia.
No,
there's no direct flight.
They aren't friendly to journalists in that way.
If the world was spherical, there would be, though, wouldn't there? You know, that's the thing.
That's what I'm saying.
Is it the flat moon is what we're into now, apparently?
The moon is flat?
I missed this
I thought the moon was a projection.
Is that true? I can't keep up. I don't get the newsletter
and
anymore.
It's something that's like, if you can't throw a stone in it and hit it, then it's not real or something. They're convinced that you should be able to hit the stone if you throw. I'm not, because gravity maybe also just a theory.
Fuck.
I think.
Man.
I mean, technically gravity doesn't.
Technically it is just a theory.
Can we start now, by the way? Can we start now? Maybe we should start now. Let's start with either that or keep the flat earther thing, because that makes me sound better.
Look, I get it. I get really bad pimples whenever I'm on a long flight. I'll get off and just
wait.
Nope, don't do it.
We gotta cut.
I gotta.
Don't bring the private conversation into this.
No, I won't.
Off the record, Austin.
Alana said it's just a theory, and I gotta dig into that one a little bit, because that is an area where colloquial use of the word theory and the actual scientific discipline, those who practice the discipline of science, use that word very differently, because in real science there is nothing above theory.
Everything is a theory. Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's that the theory of gravity, for example, is the most robust form our knowledge of gravity takes, because what it means, theory is basically a way of saying we have a model that works and has predictive power of, we can put values in and get empirically verifiable values out. But that's not the same thing as saying a law or a proof, because those are basically mathematical concepts that don't really exist in science. Because we could discover something about gravity tomorrow that changes our conception of the way it works, and just informs and refines the working theory, the working model of gravity. So when most people say theory, what they really mean is hypothesis, because that means, it's our guess that we want to test.
Yeah. We've done anything that was like, I wonder if this is true. And I haven't done any testing whatsoever, because if it was a theory, that means that it would have somehow stood up against some testing.
Well, that it would be, to be a theory, it would be you made effort to prove your hypothesis, which is the inherent bias behind it, is that you have the hypothesis,
the best available explanation.
You prove it as best you can. But am I not correct in saying that most things in science are a theory? Like physics is a theory.
There's only a few laws, right?
Again, laws are kind of a different term, and also not nearly so consistently defined, because
laws of thermodynamics, like those are.
Again, it's
again a theory though.
It's more colloquial.
I am all about this, by the way. I am all about.
It was called a law. It was called a law because the era in which it was arrived upon, we wanted to call everything a law. It was it's the same reason that it took a long time for scientists, or I guess paleontologists, to understand that dinosaurs were theoretically better than currently existing animals, because the theory for a very long time was that by definition, for an animal to become extinct, it must be inferior to later forms. So dinosaurs until very recently were always assumed to be these awful, slovenly beasts, because otherwise why did they die out? Why would there be things on the planet that were worse than a dinosaur?
But then they found the movies that they made and the books that they wrote.
Yeah, exactly. Well, scientists all went to see Jurassic Park, you see, so that was how they were like, oh, okay, right. Yeah, that makes sense. But it's definitely it's rooted in kind of, there's the Victorian view of science and the modern view of science, which are very different. And Austin's talking about the modern perspective, the laws and we are going to empirically, apply logic to the world and say we know what is very much rooted in kind of a Victorian view of the world.
For sure. And I also think the related to that, I should say, slightly peripheral to it, the whole catchphrase from the notion of natural selection and Darwinian evolution of so-called survival of the fittest. The word fittest is often misconstrued there because it often is thought to mean strongest. Or is this? Yeah, there you go.
No, you should be pulling out.
You overshot
this is a really interesting book, by the way.
Yeah, wrong book.
How science.
Audio listeners,
this is Roman science of Roman.
Not a book.
Fine.
How are you not going to go Darwin?
Christ.
Victorian or nothing.
Whatever we need to do. There we go.
Like the go-to is Darwin.
Yeah,
but
Mike,
the point being that
books.
survival of the fittest, understood properly, is that which fits in its environment.
It's not the strongest. It's the fittest.
It's not the strongest. It's not the fastest. You can be really slow and stupid.
Does the word fittest have that alternate meaning? It's
only
just the
you
most
Australians
fittest.
call it. He's quite fit, isn't he? Or if in the UK,
it's
survival of the fittest. He's fit, proper fit.
Yeah, it's a kind of archaic use of the word, but that term does not mean survival of the strong.
I didn't know that.
Especially in the kind of disgusting social Darwinist conversation where people, especially if you go back like even to that Victorian era, it was a justification for a lot of horrible racism, because it would basically be like, well, look, the Europeans showing up with their muskets and those brutish savages in the untamed lands, like survival of the fittest, right? Like we're just proving we are worth the
makes right,
survival.
Right? That's the logic.
Might makes right. And the whole point is to say that's a bullshit justification, because that's not even what survival. Never mind that's just horrible, but it's not even a proper understanding of what survival of the fittest even means, because that which is best able to endure the environmental conditions in which it lives.
Survival of the best suited to its environment.
Yeah. That's all that means.
But less. That wouldn't fit on the front of the book, though. That's
this is the worst thing I've ever said, and I feel very uncomfortable saying it. But does that not sort of apply, being that one party has, super advanced munitions? Would they not be more fit under that initial definition?
I think it's an interesting question on if humanity has kind of graduated outside the realm of natural selection.
Well, I feel like we are now evolving in technology. We're effectively cyborgs. The fact that everyone holds a phone all the time and always has it on them, we're not far away. I don't feel like there have been as many advancements in physical evolution. We are now having more advancement in our tools.
But
when does adult lactose processing come in? I think that was the last kind of biological evolution that's been tracked. Because you shouldn't be able to digest milk.
It's supposed to be like after 6 or something. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, still a lot of people
are also the only.
So we developed that Sorry, apologies. Let me frame this in the right scientific way. We developed that concurrently, and therefore those with this ability bred and therefore survived and evolved. That was humans. That comes in around farming, because that's when we start having cows to drink milk from.
But I also
no one was chasing cows in the wild.
Advancements.
Milk as an adult becomes a food that comes in the last
chasing down cows to milk them thousands of years ago.
No, but it's true. We're literally.
I think that's the last biological evolution that has been kind of tracked as something.
Appendix
I'm sure there
becoming
are other
redundant
examples.
in theory is sort of a.
But that would go back
evolution.
millions of years.
True.
Mike's talking about like in the order of thousands of years. Our intrinsic relationship to lactose has changed in a way that proliferated throughout mankind.
Switch.
Yeah,
it's a gene switch. So there's a this is, and again, like, I'm a layman, so I'm definitely going to be talking nonsense.
None of us are scientists.
My understanding is that essentially, not a scientist, definitely not a scientist.
We need a fifth play, watch, listen science.
Teach,
play, watch,
study.
listen.
Play, watch, listen,
Test.
study.
Yeah.
But like, no, it was literally a switch. It's you're meant historically, and most animals on the planet can process milk up until childhood, like until the point where they would stop nursing. And at that point, you in your physical development and maturing, it gets switched off as a thing you can do. And that's, that is something that's the last, I think that's or it's often used as an example of one of the last biological evolutions, which comes in after farming.
A favorable trait,
you think of farms as modern humans, and they are. The humans that made farms are modern humans in most extents, but that is a biological difference that comes in. And obviously, because it's so recent, there is still variability in the population, which is why some people can't process milk.
It's most,
and I
think
the role.
I think it's still a lot. I think still
the role.
I don't know what the ratio is, but it's like, but it does tie to that history of milk drinking and cultural, and therefore is very cultural in a lot of ways as well, which is interesting.
But this is where the role of technology really fundamentally alters how natural selection would otherwise have worked, because there could be a drug, for example, that assists the lactose intolerant, and therefore those whose genes never flipped will continue to reproduce and spread their lactose intolerant genes, because society has found, and to me, the obvious example of this is if you go back, not that long ago, if you had really crap eyesight, you were not likely to be having children. Or at least you or your children wouldn't survive long enough, and there would be a pretty strong environmental selective pressure on those with good eyesight. But as soon as we develop
glasses,
now it's like, it seems to me inevitable that over time, gradually, all of humanity will start to move in the direction of having crap eyesight.
But you're right that it's the word that's important in all of these conversations is likely. Insofar as this is, I think often when we think about these things, we think about like the bird whose beak is not like big enough to get to the ants, therefore that dies out. It's a lot like wish listing a game on Steam, which you should also always do. No, but it is, in the sense of large populations, you don't actually need drastic differences between population groups and their behaviors to go in a direction. So it doesn't matter that most people wish list a game on Steam and then never buy it. Some do. And there's enough that do that it can make a difference. And the same is true in evolutionary terms of like, it doesn't necessarily, yes, glasses change the situation with eyesight, but theoretically, that means that that doesn't mean that all people have access to glasses, and that those people. So there's an interesting kind of trend. But then the other thing that's important with evolution, and this is why whenever people go towards kind of the creepier, more racist ends of these conversations, which we're obviously nowhere near, but does come up with humans and evolution and all these kind of conversations, is there's a lot of stuff that there isn't evidence it actually has any relationship to evolution or to biological preferences. You can't breed for intelligence, for example. All of this kind of creepy kind of stuff that again came in the Victorian mindset of nasty stuff is kind of either disproven or has never been proven. And it's
unsurprising.
There's a lot of evidence that differences between humanity tend to come down more to culture and opportunity than they come down to biological differences in most cases. That seems to be kind of the consensus among
I know that the
modern science.
The general I was going to say consensus, but then you said consensus, and now it seems like we're saying consensus too much, and I can't think of an adjective, or a synonym rather. The reason that humans are the superior species, which is really only in that we have control of the planet effectively, is just because we were able to use tools effectively. That's it. That's all it actually comes down to. Is not anything genetic other than we were able to use tools. Yeah. The one thing
that and the monolith.
You can actually. Helped. You can actually push that farther the other direction. We, in that realm of the idea of being fit for your environment, we live all kinds of places that we are not actually biologically fit to survive. Yeah. The very fact that we have humans in space, which would instantaneously kill us without intervening technology. But most of this planet is this true for as well. We can't, without the ability to make clothing and shelter, it's no wonder why civilization developed in the world where it did, the sort of areas of Africa and the Middle East, because it's by far the most hospitable climate on planet Earth.
True for humans.
And as soon as you start going too far north and south of that, we are much more frail than we like to think of ourselves. And without the ability to develop, skinning animals for clothes and then later building shelters and then, et cetera.
Well, that's one part of how we were able to get tools in the first place, which is one thing about humans that makes us sound absolutely terrifying, is because we sweat. We can run for a really, really, really long time, or would have been able to. It's not like humans are doing this super frequently now, but would have been able to run for ages without overheating and dying, which a lot of animals do. So in theory, you could stalk a deer to the extent that the deer would keep running and would eventually overheat and die, but the human will be able to run for an incredibly long amount of time because we sweat and cool ourselves down. And that is how we were able to get the tools in the first place, which is really scary to think about. It's because we sweat. We get all gross and wet. We could stalk things scary, for ages. It's to me, just thinking about a human chasing you for 3 days and being like, guess I'll just die because I'm too hot now. But
how is that any different than cheetahs developing the ability to outflank through sheer speed? Cheetahs can't maintain that speed for more than a few seconds, but just so few things that can go faster than that.
Other animals perspirate. We're not the only ones that do. Other animals do it.
Again, the weirdest deja vu. I'm sure we've talked about animals sweating on this show before.
How many
this
animals
is feeling
sweat?
very familiar.
No, I'm sure they do, but it's just that the fact that we can outrun things or in theory outlast things is supposedly what lent us to making tools.
Am I remembering this wrong, Troy? I remember this. I feel like I'm in a deja vu moment. Come with me on this journey. There's 5 animals, and you listed them last time.
Maybe.
You knew them.
I know that. There's some.
We will know as soon as this goes live.
Horses, monkeys, apes, and hippos.
Yeah, I know hippos could.
Someone, please, if someone watching this remembers this, please do a supercut, because I feel like we're in a full repeat. Because I'm about to say that the
thing you said last time
is widely considered. Yes, but I am. I think that's the thing. I said fire is the core because that gets you communication and processing of food, so that you can, so your brain can develop.
That's Prometheus.
And I swear that's also. Huh?
That's Prometheus. I was going to say that advancement, this is what I learned from the brilliant Alice Roberts.
I was going to say, I was just going to bring her up because I was like, normally when you'd be texting Neil to call in the cavalry on some design verification.
Which always goes my way, by the way. Which always goes my way.
The cavalry, yes, the Calvary and Hobbesry. Then, yes, I was like, I bet he's texting Alice right now to say, so I got a quick paleoanthropology question for you.
So with this wonderful, I don't even know what you'd call it. It was such a weird hybrid concert play that Austin and I did with his friend Tony Lund and the 3 of the most brilliant minds on the planet, not including Tony Lund and Austin Wintory.
We were a net negative on the thing.
He brought the curve down.
I don't know about you a lot.
I was sat across from the lovely world's one of the foremost leading what does she call herself? It's paleobiologist, but
paleoanthropology
paleoanthropologist,
and also anatomist. I think would be a fair representation.
But she
of her
what she
title.
knows, and she's also a surgeon. Like, she's just brilliant, and an author, and she's just fascinating. She's one of those people like Carl Sagan that just finds wonder in what most people find pedestrian. And she did
as a side note, she did a TV special that I still haven't watched, that every time I see the key art for it go by in my Twitter when she's posting it, or I think I need to watch that, where it was, if we were designing humans from scratch, how would we make them? Like, because we've obviously, all life is an inheritance of the lineage of different forms we went through all the way back to single-celled, pre-life
stuff.
Basically.
Star stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, you want to go far enough back. Yeah,
I just
exactly.
Wanted to quote Sagan, really.
Yeah. So she made a show on like looking around at how other animals in the universe, on Earth rather, how they have adapted to various things, and if we could just kind of build this chimera from the best of the world, what would her take be? And I'll never forget, as I recall, the like placental kangaroo pouch thing. She was like, I swear that was, if I remember correctly, that was part of it. She was like, that's a better way to get your young off the ground than what humans do. And like, so the weird, freaky kangaroo human was part of her. Like, if we were redesigning humans to be better for a lot of all around, stronger, better, that's one of the features they would have. And I just thought, I need to watch this show.
You could keep stuff in there.
Yeah.
The thing that
storage.
Snacks.
The thing that
for life, right?
Oh my God, I hate Zoom sometimes.
Go ahead.
Alanah, you made a comment 22 years ago about it's an advancement. Evolution is an advancement, and that's not entirely accurate. The notion that, because I always thought evolution was the progression of,
I don't even remember
meaning
that.
it was the betterment of. Which that's what we like. We are highly evolved. We're an evolved species. That just simply means it's a lateral move. It's not up or down. This conversation with Alice Roberts that I had for the thing that Austin was talking about was a complete paradigm shift for me, because my arrogance allowed me to believe that I am an evolved human.
That you're the destination.
You are, though. You are, Troy.
I
you
am
specifically?
In the sense.
Yeah, I think Troy is. I think at the end of that show Austin was talking about, it just comes up with an image of Troy. Basically this, yeah.
Because I fly first class, I am.
I was going to say, the beginning of this conversation that may or may not end up getting cut is.
I hope that it's not, and people are like, "What a prick!" You're like, no. There's context. It doesn't make me any better, but there's at least context. But the notion that it's not really a leveling up as much as it is, well, the world did this. You just happen to fit in better to this.
This is why evolutionary scientists hate the classic Ascent of Man drawing that shows chimpanzees and earlier apes kind of gradually standing upright and walking, because that portrays it as this sort of objectively superior leveling up, and it's not how it is.
I'm sure if we've spoken about this before, I would have said it the last time, but there's this thing in Pokemon where there's this old man who goes, but if humans evolved from monkeys, then why do we still have monkeys? Because the logic being, if we evolved from monkeys, then the monkeys should have evolved.
We have had this conversation before.
Legitimately?
We have to be clear, we have covered a lot.
I don't doubt that we haven't.
The Ascent of Man thing, I'm sure I've heard before, and the only person in the world I would have heard that from is
Austin. Why do we still have monkeys?
That was a legitimate argument that I witnessed happen from the pulpit.
Yeah.
Guys, it's ridiculous to think that we evolved from monkeys. If we evolved from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? And
that was the Victorian view. That was with the dinosaurs, yeah.
Same thing.
Why would dinosaurs be great if they're not here anymore? Yeah,
right.
It's that.
Obviously, they're bad.
We won, we're the best.
Right. But no one even wants to. We all hand wave the notion that 2/3 of this planet is water, and we could barely be in it for a second before
we do suck in water.
Yeah. No, I think this reminds me.
We had to climb the fuck out just to survive.
That's the thing.
We get all pruny and wriggly for in there for 20 minutes.
Yeah, real
we can't even get into it after we eat.
I'm assuming it was massively disproven, but there was that theory in the 80s, wasn't there, that we were in water for a period of our evolution.
Well, of course we
definitely sounds.
Well, I would think that
was
in
was
theory,
Desmond
everything
Morris?
was
Someone
at some point.
No, there was a theory because our hair grows in a streamlined way, like basically all of our hairs in a way
still
that
slightly
doesn't happen
webbed.
with other apes.
Look at that.
There was like, I remember in the 80s, I'm sure it's been massively discredited now, but there was, I think it was Desmond Morris, like, had the idea of the aquatic ape, that the defining move of humanity was not to stand up, it was to swim.
We still are in water. We still grow in water.
Still need a lot of it, 70%.
No, yeah, but I'm just
probably
saying,
a lot of bad facts thrown out here. I'm sorry.
No, but
a lot of this. Please, anyone watching this, definitely fact check everything.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Here's a fact: 9 months we spend in water, in liquid, breathing liquid, for 9 months.
Yeah.
Did you know that the thing in the abyss with the breathing liquid, that's actually a thing?
It's yes, your body will remember.
I had no idea.
I love that fucking scene. It freaks me out. That first of all. It
kills you within like 10 minutes, but you can do it for longer than you'd think. Yeah.
The two things that I'm terrified of: mice and drowning. And that scene put them both in one. I was like, fucking a drowning mouse.
I thought it was going to be drowning and economy class, but
the ultimate humidifier.
This is the part where I feel like it is ethically responsible for me to intro the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah. I am not a scientist. I write video games. That's Troy Baker. He is also not a scientist. He acts in video games and is a scientist.
I absolutely am a scientist. I'm 100% am a scientist.
Okay.
So are you. So is Austin. And so is Mike.
Fundamentally disagree. That is my fiddle. He is a video game director. Let me intro the show, you punk.
Jesus.
That's Austin Wintory, who's a video game composer.
Why are you not a scientist? My son is a scientist.
Lack of any understanding of the science.
It is not something that I am educated in to the extent that I feel like you should take my word on this show. Thus, I want to give the disclosure that I am not a scientist, and you should not consider me a viable source of your science news or facts.
There's a difference, though, between saying you should consider me a viable source of science and I am not a scientist.
I would frame it like this. I would say that you can be a science-minded person. You can live your life with a...
I'm very pro-science.
But there's also just the idea of...
Some of my best friends are scientists. Troy, what is your working definition of scientist for the point you're making?
I would say there's so many people that have stumbled upon something in the process of wondering and being curious. And the reason why I push back against it so passionately is because I hate this notion that you must be some form of academic. You must be accredited. There must be a certification. There must be a profession that is attached to whatever your passion is. And there have been passionate people throughout history that have truly advanced us meaning we have gained wisdom, gained knowledge, gained art that have not been accredited. The Beatles couldn't read music.
I think that the distinction...
someone taught them how to write songs.
George Martin said, what if we actually did this to it? But they've all sat down. I've never had a piano lesson in my life, and I can't play like a concert pianist would, or someone who went to Juilliard for piano. But I can bang out some chords and make a song. And so what I don't want to do...
You know what those chords are, right? Like, to be clear, Troy, like you do... I agree with you that like you should be very worried about any institutional information. You do have the humility to have gained some knowledge from existing...
Yes.
You're building on the shoulders of giants, right? Which to me is the scientific method.
So there are two definitions.
You need to know stuff in order to build on that. And if you don't know anything about science, as none of us do...
You build as you learn.
You're going to be a shit scientist.
Yeah, so the reason that I give the disclosure of not scientists is again, because we are not... in any way expertly informed sources on this matter of
is
any
anyone
of the things
professing that you are? Are you professing that you are?
Yeah, no, I think you have a responsibility if you have a podcast that 90,000 people listen to be like, everything I said could be wrong.
Oh, no.
Okay, so you're saying that you have a responsibility.
Stop it, cancel the whole thing.
This is going to be great. So you're saying that you have a responsibility to people.
Yeah.
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's the distinction of if you're saying I am a scientist because you mean you are curious about the world, you are open to learning, you have a broad fascination with how things work. That's very different than someone who says I work in a particle collider all day and I am running experiments that my career is predicated on.
Absolutely.
I think it's about one word implies you might be conceiving of yourself as being like that other person, in the same way that like I love encouraging amateur musicians, but if someone can sit at the piano and poke a few keys that they've never heard before, I would have no problem calling them a composer. But there is also a functional difference from them saying, I'm a composer, with no qualifying remarks or anything from me saying it, right? Surely there must be.
I would say that if someone goes, perfect example. There was someone who recently took credit for work that I did.
I apologized.
Doesn't matter.
That was me in that game.
I thought I did really well in the medium.
And
we've all done that, apparently.
That's my performance as Joel in Last of Us 2 was
really
groundbreaking.
Really.
And the bet you're like that episode of Family Guy where it's Fred Savage is the best actor because he's been Rush Limbaugh and everybody else.
Yeah.
I made it relevant.
I knew it. I got the reference.
I had this immediate knee-jerk reaction. Go, excuse me. No, you didn't. And call him out on his shit. And I really sat there for a while. And I drafted the tweet in my mind of what I would say to this person. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. I know the truth. I know what I am. I know that I did the work. He can say whatever he wants. And more importantly, the second that I give any credence or attention to that tweet, IGN picks it up, Kotaku picks it up, Variety picks it up. It becomes a thing. So
there's also a self-fulfilling prophecy aspect of if that person is saying that in order to try to get work, whoever takes the bait will quickly discover whether they have any veracity or not.
Well, they'll be tricked.
That is the difference. When this person was actively saying, I want you to see this as my demo reel, and I want you to be able to hire me because of this, that takes a different thing. The intention and the agenda behind it is what makes it nefarious.
That's so brazen. Like, that's amazing.
That's very brazen.
He has your work in the reel. Is there any potential chance that that guy did like some barks or something for your character later?
He absolutely did. He absolutely did.
So he's using clips of your performance.
He's saying that was me. I did that. And there have been people who have workshopped, and then it happens all the time to where there are studios, and this is something that the union really pushed hard against because they're like, no. If there's any acting, it must be done by actors. And most studios have some form, like AAA studios especially, who are going to incorporate performance capture into their pipeline, will have some volume set up in their studio so that they can block scenes out so that before they get actors onto the stage where it's costing tens of thousands of dollars to be there every day, they go, we've already moved this, we've already kind of worked it out, it's terrible, we're shitty, we use people from accounting or whatever to make this work, to see if it'll work. And there's a lot of times, like Billy Harper did a lot of the move sets for Delson on a trampoline because he's incredibly adept. He's the animation director. He knew exactly what he needed. I couldn't do it, and he could. He was the best person for that job. Hellblade. The fact that I'm drawing a blank on her name right now. She wasn't she the animation director? I think.
In animation, I'm not clear on her
studio,
role,
I can't remember.
She suited up and she won best performance. She crushed it. Is the best person for the job. There's a difference between someone going, I helped along this thing, and here's the person that actually did that scene, did that role, especially when I'm in the credits. It's that's my role. But what I'm talking about is if someone said, if I go outside and I go, I'm going to perform a science experiment today. And especially looking at Traveler, I want him to have that curiosity, that wonder, and not think that curiosity and that wonder belongs to some other group of people. It belongs to him now. And I was like, let's do a science experiment. Let's find out what happens when we do this. If then, let's just do very, very simple cause and effect. That's a simple basic. And I can look at him and go, see, dude, you're a scientist. Today, we just got back from the park, and he was kicking a soccer ball. A football, and I'm doing my best to make sure that we call him. I even saw somebody else was like, we got a proper footballer here, and he got it past me. I was like, you got to pass the keeper. Let's get on the pitch. Like I'm trying to understand that it's only in this country that we call
Australia
it soccer.
says soccer as well.
Huh? Australia does soccer? Mm-hmm. All right, so there's two places he can go with that. but he's out there
right now.
He's kicking the hell out of that ball, and he's running and he's laughing. And I'm not going to look at him and go, "You're not actually a soccer player." You know that, and you need to let people know.
Troy.
We're kids.
So I would like to give you the two definitions of scientist. One,
please prove me wrong.
You've been sitting on that real patiently. You deserve some credit.
A person who is studying or has expert knowledge of one or more of the natural or physical sciences. Mm-hmm. 2, a scientist is someone who systemically gathers and uses research and evidence to make a hypothesis and test them to gain and share understanding and knowledge. So the first one is the academic. Is the I'm not a scientist unless I have expert knowledge, which, is what I would align with. But the second one is a little bit more inclusive in that it is saying that you can be a scientist as long as you systemically gather and use research and evidence to make and test hypotheses.
Surely that says systematically.
Yes, sorry, it does say systematically. Correct, yes. I definitely butchered that word. But I think that one doesn't require you to be an expert. It just requires you to routinely research.
Well, that would be the argument, wouldn't it? That you can be a bad scientist. That would be the argument that would fit with what you're saying is essentially, yeah, with all love and respect, Troy, to you and Traveller, like, Traveller, yes, a scientist, probably not a very good one, right? Like, probably, or at the start of his scientific career.
And I don't think CERN is going to come to them and go, can you please help us break this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going to fix this.
I don't think that anyone is going to come to us and go, please help us come up with the scientific answer for this dilemma.
Well, see, that's not even
so
a problem.
Your argument would be that you can be
an
amateur scientist, right?
But then it's not a problem. Why?
Well, that's easier for me to address and be like, I do not have the expertise to do this. But for us to have a podcast where the four of us do not work in the field and to confidently say things about, like, I read this and not make the disclosure seems irresponsible.
What confident thing did we say?
You said a lot of shit.
Oh, I said a bunch of shit. Yeah.
Besides the moon is flat, which we know is true.
I don't even remember what I said. That's why it's important for me to be like, don't listen to me.
I have this really annoying quality where everyone thinks I know what I'm talking about at all times. It's messed me up so many times in life.
It's just the accent, man.
My concern, we always believe that you're true. My concern is that we kind of preemptively make assumptions for people as opposed to just being honest. And saying, first of all, I'm not a professional driver. I don't claim to be a professional driver. So before anyone gets mad at me for being a professional driver, I was out on the 405. It's like, well, hold on a second.
But if you were telling people like how the brakes on their car worked, you should probably provide the information that you're not a great driver, that you're not a professional driver. Right?
Unless I happen to know empirically true how brakes work on a car.
This is where we're making something binary, which actually exists on a spectrum.
Yeah,
because
for sure. That's why I don't want to say I am not a scientist. It's like, well, yes, I am.
I'm going to say I am not a scientist. I'm a science enthusiast. Yeah. But
I tend to be closer to Alanah on this one.
I'm not an actor. I'm a performer. Oh, fuck off.
I think for me, the distinction is not about the gatekeeping, because I definitely agree that that's not productive. That if you say to somebody, pick up a paintbrush and go have at it on this canvas, and they're like, well, I'm not a painter. It's like there should be, that voice is only a negative presence in your life. So I agree.
Agreed.
The spirit of what you're saying, Troy, is about barriers to entry in like exploring life and the fullest lives that we can have. Fully with you. But I think Alanah ultimately does draw a correct distinction that just, I am a scientist, moving on, is slightly deceptive. And so said with caution.
I saw a really good interview with a NASA scientist about, they were being interviewed about flat earthers, and like the interviewer was obviously trying to get...
They must be so sick of that by now.
Well, that was interesting. So there was a series of interviews. It was there's a documentary, a Netflix documentary that was really interesting about like flat earth kind of enthusiasm, and obviously that's now blended off on, I guess fortunately, like there's less of that, but the reason there's less of that is because they've all moved over onto the QAnon bollocks. So unfortunately there's a weird kind of transition point there. But the thing that was interesting with NASA interviews is, yes, 90% of the interviews, it was NASA scientists going, they're morons, they're idiots, this is so annoying. But there was one, I remember it thinking it was beautiful kind of sign of empathy and the kind of person I think Troy would agree with, which was basically a NASA scientist saying, these people are inquisitive, they're interested, they've been poorly educated. and it's a shame that they're coming to the wrong conclusions, but it does come from a position of wanting to know answers or be interested. We need to catch these people and turn them into good scientists. That was something that was expressed by that. I think that's a very generous read of flat earthers, but I liked it as a humble approach to that. I thought very kind and gracious, yeah, for sure.
And I think the part of that really resonates with me, and I love that, is that part of what I think drives people towards flat earther thinking or other QAnon sort of conspiracy theories and things like that are the fact that the experts present it as, this is a fact, and if you're wrong, you're an idiot. Mm-hmm. When in reality, properly assessed, if you were to go to follow those experts to their conferences, it's a lot of wrangling with truth. Do we know that this is actually the case? And so when they are seen as this monolithic, impenetrable fortress where if you're on the outside, then you're an idiot, and it's this impermeable sort of wall, that it is seen as like, well, I'm not getting through that. I may as well find shelter elsewhere. But science isn't like that in practice, in reality. And if they come across as very arrogant, in other words, as, we are right, you are wrong, get over it. As opposed to like the truest way to say it would be, this is what we think is currently true, and there's a mountain of evidence to support it, but we actually could be wrong. Like, let's show you why we think it's right. That's very different attitude, even if it
that's
gets
great
to the same
if the
conclusion.
other party comes in with good faith.
That's what I was going to say,
right?
is I feel amazing. The opposite. So I actually, to Mike's point of like speaking about flat earthers and being asked what you think of them, I do think it would be a much more productive thing to do, to say, well, then explore that, like, research it. That you can, a lot of discoveries occur when we're trying to research something else. Like you could discover something that we don't know. Definitely research it rather than just call people idiots. But that community, and of course you can, I'm generalizing, is extremely arrogant and hostile. So to say,
it's because they are isolated. That's the thing.
You sound like a bit of a globe head there, Alanah.
Oh no, we lost him.
Honestly, I'm trying to see what book is about to appear.
Oh, Jesus.
He's got a flat
Earth, but it's a round book. It's a spherical object. That would be the best irony ever.
I think I don't know, Alanah. I see it the same way that I regard, like, if you look at the tiny subset of the highly religious that we could call the kind of really fundamentalist, like aggressively hostile, whether it's the Westboro Baptists or an Islamist or any number of other types that are just militantly sealed off in their belief system and not representative of the majority umbrella within their belief system. I don't look at those people as sort of de facto evil. I see them as victims of indoctrination in almost every case, where they, even those that become the leaders, can be traced back to a moment where they were at some crossroad and they were either taken advantage of or, sold some snake oil and ran with it. Now, that's not to excuse them or to say that those that are then running a parish built on bigotry and, misogyny or homophobia or racism or whatever, and they clearly should know better by this point. I just think it's complicated, and I will always start from a position of trying to empathize and think, how did this person get to be that person? Because there were a succession of steps where, as Troy has said, at some point they were just a baby, and there was nothing about this which was preordained. And so if we try to think back to, there came a moment or a series of moments where they were put on a path less than they actively, consciously chose a path. And I know that I can't speak for everyone in this way. There probably are plenty of examples that would say they had everything going for them, and then they just, for whatever reason, chose a shitty path for their life. Like, I'm not denying the possibility of that, but I don't think most crappy people that is descriptive of. And so when I see a flat earther, in most cases, I see them, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, I mean this in an empathetic way, I see them more as victims than as idiots.
I definitely, and we were trying to think of where, I would think it was like in like Serbia or something. It was really random, but there were flat earthers that were out and like not protesting, but kind of like changed my mind kind of thing. They were set up on this bridge, and I just kind of sat and watched, and I was like, I want to know what this is. And I was familiar with the theory, but it's what causes this? And then I watched that documentary, Behind the Curve or whatever it's called, Gleaming the Cube.
That's the one I was talking about. That's the one that had that quote I said. Yeah, that's the one.
The hypothesis.
Yes. Of the hypothesis of flat Earth. And what I realized,
tenuous hypothesis.
at the end of it, I realized I was like, oh gosh, I get it. I get why these people feel this way. And I think we've talked about this before. There are people that the system that they were given has failed them because the system that they were given failed their parents, that failed their parents, and speaking of evolution, it's not that it's getting better necessarily. It's just adapting to the time, to the child. And I know this because I'm very aware of the systems that I was given and the systems that I can tacitly hand on to Traveler. Even if I'm not intentionally doing it, I'm like, ooh, man, I'm even just passively by the act of doing this, I am teaching him and instilling a system in him that I know will fail him eventually. And whether it's a teenager or an adult, it will fail him. It will break down. But watching these people, the system has failed them. And by and large, these people would consider themselves to be fundamental Christians or having some faith-based community that they're involved in or a faith-based system. And specifically with fundamentalist Christians, there is a notion, I know this from growing up in it, if you're being attacked, good, you're right. Because we are not of this world.
It's doctrinally enshrined in the Bible that if you are being persecuted, you are essentially righteous. Like it is a
the byproduct of your righteousness. The world will persecute you. The world will come against you.
It's a useful thing to indoctrinate people who work in your fields into, isn't it?
When people come against them and go, "You're so stupid," num 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 num, I'm right on. So it's actually
never gonna, calling people dumb is never going to change their minds. Like it just
true, but even coming against,
never won as an argument in history, right? Calling someone
but you're dumb.
Or you're an idiot.
Anyone of anything.
That's just an end of the conversation. But the problem is the breaking down of when they do these tests. They're so far bought in that it has to be something other than truth hitting them in the face.
It's because it becomes interwoven with identity, and
100%.
as soon as you're pulling at the threads of what makes someone who they are, and not just that, but their community, their family, like their whole infrastructure of their life. This is again why I empathize, because I see the opposite end. Like there's a YouTube. It's kind of in a way not dissimilar from this, except it's always done live, but it's on the subject of religion, where they have people call in.
They're always talking about video games.
They're always off topic on video games. Yeah, there's on this show, they're basically like a show for people that are calling in anonymously to say, I am questioning my faith, but I live in a really religious community and I don't know who to turn to and I don't know what to do. And they're panicking. And these people it's all hosted by people that have been there and most cases lost their families, like been completely disowned, or like in the case of, like if you look at Jehovah's Witnesses, there's this practice of shunning, which is, for the very ardently believing. Not all Jehovah's Witnesses are like this, but it's pretty well baked into the design of that particular sect.
When I was about 10, my best friend was a Jehovah's Witness, and because I wouldn't go to church with her, I wasn't allowed to see her anymore.
Yeah, that was probably her parents.
Similar situation with a friend. Yeah.
And that's what I mean. These people call in where they grew up with that. And then at some point, usually they found some video on YouTube that raised some questions. And they were like, wait a minute. Maybe everything is not true that I've been led to believe. But then they freak out because they're like, if I reject this belief, my whole world will explode. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I can even survive it. There's even a thing called the, I think it's called it's called like the Preacher Project or something like. I'm blanking on what it's actually called, but there are actually a number of ministers and preachers and pastors that have lost their faith and feel completely trapped in their life because they have no other marketable skill. None. And they're like, I've spent 40 years.
I know some 40-year-old game designers who are in the same boat. Yeah.
Well, this would be like, imagine you're 60 and you went to seminary and you've spent the last 35, 40 years.
At that point, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally like, I can't pay the bills any other way than this. Never mind that I'm basically lying to my congregation. So there's like a whole super anonymized, very, very like you have to be vetted to be let into this thing because it's very important that everybody's identity be protected because they're in many cases a central pillar of a community and they're just trying to figure out what's the right move for me here.
It's exactly the same as like if you played Xbox your whole life, but then you really like Ghost of Tsushima.
It's the exact same
thing. It's a real struggle for these people.
Same.
And admitting
they don't know what to do.
Is objectively better than the Xbox, stuff like that.
How are they supposed to do that? It's their whole life.
Yeah. It's
just remember that they're victims.
I just felt we needed more comments just to kind of mix things up.
Yeah,
so.
Hold on.
You want to know?
But I mean, obviously not that dramatic.
We've not touched on any controversial subjects in this episode. I just feel like the comments are very boring, very dry, very empty.
So the
identity
casting
stuff
of Joel and Ellie.
That's my favorite part of this is that we got comments being like, I really can't wait to hear you guys talk about the casting next week.
Look at my name when I first started off. I was like, just letting you know, I'm not Pedro Pascal, but I heart Pedro Pascal. I haven't even talked about it. If that's not the most on-brand thing, look, this is what I truly, and Austin will back me up on this. I truly crave this. I love the organic discourse that just pops up out of like, well, wait a minute, you said that. I want to understand more about you so that maybe I can understand more about me. That is what I'm all about. And if anyone ever thinks that this is a disagreement, that is like a negative thing, it is not, man. There are very few people in the world that I respect more than the people that I have the fortune of being in a square with every week. And that's why I listen, and that's why I feel comfortable asking and saying these things. Because if I felt like, first of all, if I didn't respect you, we wouldn't have these conversations. Number two, I also want to learn. I want to have my perspective and if this last year taught me anything, I have to change my worldview. My worldview has to be bigger than what it was. It has to be bigger than when I was 15, 18, 30, 40. It has to be bigger than that because I'm responsible now for a very, very short time for the custodianship of someone who's going to go out in the world and potentially do a lot of good. And I want to make sure that I didn't instill in him a broken down system that really failed me, and that I give him something that I better. And a lot of times it comes from conversations like this. It sure as shit has come from conversations with Austin, where I've learned more about myself and how to be a better human through these conversations. And if there's any kind of behavior that I want to demonstrate from this, whether it be about video games, TV, film, books, flat earthism, or whatever, it's that this is what needs to happen in the world, is we need to have more conversations where we listen to each other and are truly feel comfortable sharing our beliefs.
How do you feel about the
What do you think Pedro
Pascal
Pascal would think about that?
Both of you just dug in. Man, I got instantly lit up. There's the picture.
The problem is, what happened, Troy, was you spoke sincerely to an Australian.
We have to make fun of it or we're uncomfortable.
I'm sitting here.
Really awkward.
I'm here ready for the fucking hug.
You two Americans are sat there like, yeah, man, let's talk about this.
So, Alanah, would you like to go first, or would you like for me to? Oh, no, please. You do much better if you go over it.
Can't be sincere. It's not allowed. It's illegal. But I mean, for the record, I agree with you. And I even if we do have disagreements, I'm a big fan of them. That's how the point is like.
Well, and also going into a conversation, anticipating that you have an incomplete sort of perspective. Therefore, I'm not going to preach. I'm like I'm putting. It's like a potluck. Like I'm going to bring to the table what I can, put it on. Now you put your part on. Now you put your part on, and everything gets all mixed around, and you actually absorb. That's the difference. When you just want to proselytize and fucking get up on the thing, like, all right, guys, listen real quick. When I finish, I'm going to bounce because I'm not actually here for anything other than that. You know, like that's fundamentally, I think that's
fear and insecurity that drives that. It's like, prove me wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I prefer to learn and hear things that I've not heard before, just in general, at all times, always.
Same.
Can I give you a piece of trivia then that I think is really cool that relates to evolution?
Is it about Pedro Pascal?
Or Jerry Goldsmith?
It's neither. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say. It's neither.
I guess I'll allow it.
Jesus.
Because I wrote this. I came across an article that I meant to bring up. It's like I have my kind of mental list of play, watch, listen subjects. I
do that too, but we never get to any of them.
Exactly.
I abandoned my list long ago.
You two used to post them. You two used to like private message us like with all of this. We should talk about this. That's stopped now. That's just you've ceased doing.
I know, but
this is just about porn and pores. Go on, Austin.
It's amazing.
We'll talk about that in the chat.
It's true.
Yeah.
Alanah talked about that. Just to put that, like,
I didn't say who it was going to be. I didn't say who it was going to be. I was protecting the anonymity and the sanctity of that thread.
Fair enough.
Austin, go. What's your ridiculous trivia?
So when you were, it's just perfect because it's so amazingly on topic. Even though this is something that I read this by chance, I don't know, months ago, where when you were saying what the definition of evolution is, and it's not a ladder, it's not a progression forward. The actual definition in biological terms would be variation in allele frequency over time, which basically is another way to phrase it is population mechanics, which is what Mike was talking about. It's not that the whole population suddenly becomes a new thing. It's that certain traits start to emerge, and then those that flourish under that condition will start to kind of outbreed the others.
Like wishlisting Thomas Was Alone on Switch.
Exactly. Perfect example, yeah. Those that do will have more children.
I don't even know if
you can
wishlist on. Can you wishlist on Switch? I don't know if you can actually.
I can wish that it's part of the list on Switch.
We could submit a ticket to Nintendo. That's step one.
Yeah.
How the hell did we not talk about the Nintendo Direct?
Wait, pause.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
Austin, go ahead.
So, in one of the ways that led Darwin to discover evolution itself was on the Galapagos Islands, that as you go around the circumference of the island, the different species of finches, the birds, would have the ability to interbreed with their neighboring population. But as you kind of make your way around the perimeter of the island, those across from one another can't. That concept is referred to as a ring species, where because as populations within a given species become isolated, given enough time, they often lose the ability to interbreed because they evolve in different directions from one another. And
I've been to some towns in England like that.
Exactly.
I just wondered how he got them to do you just take two birds and go, do it?
Now
do it.
Piss.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it.
Victorian era science was a little messier than today in many regards.
My lady.
But yeah, so point being that it's a known phenomenon that you can have species that sort of on a clock, like in the 7 and 2 o'clock position, wouldn't be able to interbreed, but the 1 and 2 position would be, because they're just genetically similar enough still, even though they are distinct populations. And so one of the ways that humanity has really come to understand the mechanics of where those dividing lines are, because we tend to think, okay, there's a fundamental difference between, a lion and a tiger. But the reality is that as things diverge, those defining lines in closely related species are really hard. And the whole idea of cladistics and drawing these trees, the kingdom, phyla, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's actually a very challenging subject because life is more complicated than that. We try to put it in these boxes to make it understandable for our textbooks, but the reality is that life is just generation after generation doing what it's going to do, and we're trying to come up with rule sets to understand it. Point being, one of the ways that we've come to really understand how the mechanics of this work is from lice, which this blew my mind when I discovered this. I came across this on some article by accident. I wish. My baby. So because there are species of lice that can only really live like on gorillas, for example, and they will flourish all over the body of the gorilla.
Immediately starts scratching. That's good.
Oh wow, that's true. Jesus,
that's an amazing reaction.
Is that like the sympathetic yawn?
Yeah.
Just
the
feeling
yawn,
it.
Yeah.
As
Which
you
is
might
also an
imagine,
evolutionary outcome.
They will be able to flourish everywhere on the gorilla's body because it's on an all interconnected system. But what's interesting is that because humans, we've gradually lost most of our hair relative to our ape ancestors. Most of it, the more evolved ones among us. We
prove it?
Because of that, there is actually a difference that head lice and chest and body lice and forgive me.
Oh, because they're on different islands now.
They are. It is exactly the same as species being separated by an island or a mountain range.
Body lice existed.
That's amazing.
There are different forms of lice that
count your lucky stars.
The literal loss of hair created ecological isolation, and they cannot interbreed anymore.
Wow.
And that blew my mind. Like we are our own microcosm of how evolution works, even within one body. I found that to be the coolest thing.
Just because we lost our hair on our neck, or we lost hair on wherever, like
the hair is varied. That's super interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Like they discovered a lot about the underlying mechanisms of evolution by studying lice and realizing that our lice are different than other ape lice, and we have more species that can make a home on our bodies than our counterparts in the ape world. I just thought that was the coolest little case study of how evolution works.
I have a friend who's
I've wanted to share that for like 6 months, and I'm done.
Finally, the episode arrived. We're going to call this the lice episode. I have a friend who's a chiropractor who's actually been trying to convince me to go for a while because supposedly there are things in chiropractic that can help with asthma, which I was not aware of.
Okay.
Look, I don't know. There's people that would go for and against chiropractic medicine. I'm using
Is that the one where it's not quite as scientific as the other one? There's chiropractic and there's the other one.
It's the same thing as acupuncture in that sense. Like it is in the same office that I went to. I haven't gone there in a while, obviously, but there's an acupuncturist and there's a chiropractor. And there's stuff where he's like, look, man, look, I'll show you. Your right foot is longer than your left. And that's not just because your tibia is longer. It's because your hips are out because the way that you sit. He goes, do you have a wallet in your back wallet? I was like, yeah. He goes, get rid of that thing. He's like, you're sitting in an unnatural way. And if you do it for that long, your muscles will start adapting to it and it throws your posture off. If your posture is off, I know this from running, like it all starts with your feet. So there's whether or not it can affect those things. I've heard it can affect asthma, digestive systems, all sorts of stuff. But it makes sense.
I think in the UK it's classed as an alternative medicine.
It's considered basically an alternative medicine here, even though
a chiropractor.
A chiropractor can't.
I think in the UK you're separate. It's separate.
Unclear.
I believe.
Yeah, a chiropractor cannot give a prescription, but a doctor can. So there are people who are a doctor that are also a chiropractor. But like my acupuncturist, like, look, he was like, you call them, like meridians and stuff that they flow on. It's like, we had terms for this before there was a scientific definition for it. He's like, if you touch this, you will feel better here. And I'm like, I've sat down and he's put pins in my back and it's like, that pain is now gone.
So do you consider like something like acupuncture, is that a faith thing for you? Is that like almost like a religious or spiritual thing?
No, I think that
you consider that science.
I would consider it...
Or it's somehow separated from that.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider it a spiritual practice at all, in the same sense that yoga is not a spiritual practice.
I think it is for some people is probably the distinction there.
What's interesting, like reading that notion specifically came from this Alan Watts book when he's talking about the Buddhist practice of it. It was like yoga is not a spiritual practice. Neither meditation is not a spiritual practice. Neither is it is something that we do, but it's not a spiritual thing. This is about...
Well, both have been secularized now, right? Like I do meditation and yoga like that, but you can do that without any of the spiritual accent.
Yeah.
Like you can truly treat that as a secular kind of...
And tracking that trend, actually, it was secular, then it was religion. Really? Yeah, then it became a spiritual thing, and then it became this. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
At least according to what I've read. But I wouldn't say there's a difference, man. You can go into faith healing all you want, whether there is something that happens to but we can get lost in that whole thing. But from going to an acupuncturist, and there's several friends that I have, and anecdotal evidence suggests that there is a difference. There's a physical difference from having a visit with an acupuncturist or a chiropractor versus not. So take that for what it is.
What I was going to say about the chiropractor was that they've noticed a trend of, because they're people who deal with bones, of people's posture changing in a rounded shape because people are now looking down so often because of their phones. That just in general, the stress in people's necks and the way that they just stand normally is getting rounder earlier than it would normally. And there was a discussion about whether that will potentially become an evolutionary thing, whether there will be something that, we won't know for a very long time because everyone is always looking at this piece of technology that is always down, if there will be some kind of change to the way that we actually form or to how our spines grow or something like that. Because everyone is kind of depending on that, and it can give you neck strain right now. Whereas maybe eventually...
This is where the challenge becomes that because evolution is so much about inherited traits genetically, it's hard for me to see how that would be a thing, because if someone had like a super liquid skeleton and did not have any adverse effects and constantly bending down, it's not like we live in a world where that person is likely to reproduce at a greater rate and therefore spread their very iPhone-friendly skeleton genes.
That's true, but isn't it still just about people adapting, like their bodies physically adapting? In any case,
well, that's the question of whether that's something that's happened over a lifetime or is genetically predisposed. The one that's interesting to me is that human core body temperature. I just googled it, so I wanted to make sure I was right. Human core body temperature has gone down over the last century by a tiny amount, but we run colder than we used to.
Interesting.
And the theory is that that's because we live in houses.
Interesting.
So
as opposed to being in.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that humans basically we've become softer. Basically, we don't need to survive outside as much as we used to. So on average, of course, there's variation from individual to individual, but on average, human body temperature has gone down.
That's interesting. I wonder what the ramifications of that could be. Related, just want to give a shout out to everyone in Texas right now. It's a massive snowstorm, and a lot of them have lost power, which seems absolutely awful.
And presumably they're not set up for it at all, so like none of the infrastructure's in place.
No, power's gone out completely. Right. And then black ice is a big thing, so there are people just sliding off of roads. It's pretty terrible. So, Texas is a big state. If anyone's out there and you listen to the show, hope you're okay. Please stay warm. Yeah. Do not gas yourselves. People keep passing out because of they're either having trouble with their gas heating or with their cars to heat themselves up. Make sure you don't let your gases be inhaled. Get rid of them somewhere. It's a huge bummer. Hope everyone's all right. And I guess on that note,
their infrastructure is not designed for that.
Which is weird because I feel like it snows there every year, but snowstorm is a different thing. I think this is
inordinate. This is like a blizzard, and it's also
there's cold and then there's cold, right? That's the European thing of like there's cold, which is fine, and then there's like the freak kind of horrific stuff.
Doesn't snow a lot.
There's a great deal of things that happen like in a 10-degree bar of temperature change that are disastrous.
Especially with regard to power lines and stuff or windmills that are generating electricity. Yeah, no good. I have a friend whose power is out, but he was like, "We're okay. The kids went sledding. That was not a thing they were going to have in their childhood."
That's true.
The classic Texan hobby of sledding. Yeah.
So seen a lot of very cute dog videos. People's dogs seeing snow that they were never going to see. So that's good. But generally, just hope everyone's all right. And I guess on that note, we should wrap up this episode of the show that has nothing to do with video games.
We're not going to talk about
our video games.
Do you want to? How do you guys feel about Last of Us casting? My opinion is that I feel like I wait for performances and don't judge actors based on anything other than their performances. Thank you. Good day.
I don't know that I have anything to add to that.
I think it looks like a fun choice. I think it fits.
A fun choice.
It's a very fun game.
That's the wrong word. Yeah, it's the wrong word. But I think it's not the obvious choices for either character, but that's kind of interesting, and I feel that gestures towards it being its own thing, which I think no one actually wants something that's an absolute duplicate of the game.
It is odd.
I think the game is the game. I think the show should be its own thing.
People like the uncanny valley of translation to a different medium ruins it, and the more that it doesn't actively make us go, oh, that's this. Like I love the idea of embracing whole cloth differences, but fundamentally to what you just said, Alanah, I was excited. He's clearly the real deal, but I only know her from the one performance, but it was the most memorable thing in the last season of Game of Thrones.
She held her fucking own, right?
Yeah.
Like, fair play.
Yeah.
But I think it's weird because Troy's in the room, but like, I feel like that's such a definitive performance of that character and such a specific
Ashley Johnson
set of choices.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to see someone try and do that
Neither.
On screen, particularly. I want to let that be its own thing and see the new thing. Troy, what's your opinion?
I found out, a little while before they were going to announce, and Neil, I proven to him that I could be trusted with sensitive information. So he's like, "Hey, just want to let you know this is going to break," and I was like, "Awesome." He's, "How do you feel?" And I was like, "I think it's an incredible choice because it does immediately on its face say we're doing something different, and that the story exists beyond the characters that performed it, or even the original telling of that. The story and the world is bigger than just this game. If it just belongs on a disc that goes into a console, it's got to be bigger than that. Come on." So Pedro Pascal, to me, I was like, you might as well have presented the actor for Joel with a sack full of puppies and kittens, because he's bulletproof right now. It's just like, everybody loves a Mandalorian. He's incredibly charming. He's proven to be incredibly versatile, talented, and it's different without going, look how different we can be. And I think that if you had gone too far down that road, the casting of the actor would have overshadowed the performance. So this to me is like, we're different.
Threads the needle.
Yeah. And I think it's incredibly, and he's been incredibly gracious. The way that he has approached the role, the way that he approached the announcement, the way that he handled it, shows that he's someone who genuinely wants to be, he wants to service the role, not have the role service him. Yeah. Bella Ramsey, same thing. She was incredible in that, in Game of Thrones. I can't imagine how much she's grown since that. Because it was several years now.
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious to see what that looks like. I think that she has a tougher road ahead of her, because I have no idea where they're going to be taking this story, and I don't know, how far back they go and how far forward they go. But I definitely think that it's look, to kind of use the same approach that we were talking about before as far as scientists. I am not a casting director. I have done casting before and I've done directing before. But the people that are in charge of this franchise are incredibly seasoned, informed, and proven. So I'm feel pretty good about letting them make this decision, because left to my own devices, I probably would not have made as good of a call.
Plus, intuitively, what excites me above all, and this casting seems to demonstrate it or be representative of that, is the fact that Neil is a driving force behind it. It's not just like
handing
signing it off.
The studio or whatever.
Yeah, like he's and Neil understands the things that one needs to understand, just to put it maximally broadly, but the differences between the mediums. Also, what makes The Last of Us The Last of Us? Like clickers are not what make The Last of Us The Last of Us. Or like there's a lot of externalities that, even though they probably will be there in some form or another, you could get rid of all that and not lose the essence of what makes it what it is. And that's why I think this casting represents that is a well understood thing, that you don't need a superficial duplication of whatever traits it looks like from the outside. But then on top of that, to have someone like Craig Mazin, who is also like a unbelievably brilliant mind in his own right, and just fantasizing about what he'll do or is doing with this sandbox of like toys, and saying like, what if it's this? What if it's that? And I feel like I can obviously I don't know at all, but I can fantasize that the two of them and whoever else is at that table are like cooking up ideas that then get sort of iterated on and end up driving it pretty far afield, but everything is done through the normal writer process that yields great shit. And so I'm like, I think this one may be the first one to finally come along that's like, fuck, this, anyone in the world could watch this, and it doesn't, you love it. You can springboard from a love of the game into this and embrace it, or you can come in cold with no knowledge that video games even exist. I'm very optimistic that this has all the right hallmarks of finally breaking that curse.
The biggest commonality that I think the show and the game will have is that it will do what The Last of Us did for games. I believe that this show will do for especially video game adaptations and television. I think that it will set a new standard and prove that you can do what you didn't think you could do, and do it with excellence.
I sure hope so. All right. On that note, we'll see you all next week.
On that note, that's a better note.
That's the title of the episode as well. Thanks to everyone who watched the 15 minutes of us talking.
10 minutes of us talking about The Last of Us is what they were here for.
I know, I was going to love it. Topic starts at 1 hour, 20 minutes.
You don't know.
Classic.